Hey, what's up? I do almost 95% of my work on the command line, and my Tmux Neovim workflow video that I created 2 years ago is one of my best performing videos with 100k views. So in this video, I'll give you my 2026 updated version of this video, going through my complete mind map with a few updates, a few changes, and how my workflow has changed and how everything is tied together. So let's jump in. I always start this video by giving you the overview of what we're gonna talk about today. So I'm going to talk about my OS, how I configured my terminal, which editor I use, and all of the elements that are comprised with that. And I like to start reading out this piece that I wrote here about the actual foundation of the workflow, being that my workflow is completely based on the command line. I therefore have very little programs or tools running on the graphical side of the OS, whether it be macOS or Linux. All I need is a terminal and a web browser, but a window manager is a big bonus to my productivity. My main philosophy is to have a minimalistic workflow which uses very little resources. It should be a distraction-free, keyboard-centered, and efficient environment to do my best work. And that is the goal that I'm always striving for. And this workflow is a work of art, I should say. It has accumulated over many years of tinkering and constantly optimizing, and I also had a lot of help from my mentors, and I actually want to dedicate this video to one of my mentors who recently passed away in a very tragic way. I won't go into details and I won't mention his name because he was a very private person, but you know who you are if you're watching somehow from up there or wherever. Thank you for everything that you've given me. I dedicate this video and my work this year to you. May you be happy, safe, and well, wherever you are. So let's jump into the workflow. So as I said, it is designed to be minimal and to use little resources. So if I do --H, we are currently using 12 gigabytes of RAM of my 62 gigabytes available. And if I open up BTOP, then we will see that most of this is coming from actually OBS, because I am actually recording in 4K as I'm creating this video, obviously. Those things are taking the most memory, but if I actually turn off Obsidian and my browser and everything, then I don't know, it's less than a gigabyte that I'm actually using on the OS side of things and for the core of my workflow. Yeah, basically everything is centered around GitHub, or I should actually, the map is changing from year to year, right? So actually I should change this to Git, because I am not necessarily using GitHub for everything anymore. But the way I do things is I store my workflow in Git, obviously with a .files repo. And my .files repo used to be public, but it has become such an advanced setup that I was getting tons of questions every single day, and it was just becoming a large chore to actually answer those and to serve those people. So I decided to make it private, because the workflow is too advanced for people to just go in and to look at. But basically what I use is Chemois to manage my .files. That is the tool that I use. And all of my workflow in terms of editor configuration, my GPG configuration, SSH, my scripts collection, all of this is gathered in my .files repo. And when I then spin up a new machine, all I have to do is I pull in that repo and set it up, and then my everything is configured right out of the box. And I can also do this in containerized or ephemeral environments, which we're going to get into a little bit later. All of that is stored in Git as code. And yes, it says GitHub here. So some of these things, yes, they are stored in GitHub. But actually, I'm now self-hosting my own Git server as well. For that, I use Forgeo. That is apparently the right pronunciation of it. Forgeo, this is a fork of Gitty. So Gitty was a very, very compelling alternative for self-hosting your Git server. But Forgeo was a fork of that because Gitty got bought by a company and some things happened. And Forgeo is the real deal in terms of like free open source software, guaranteed 100% free software. I'm a supporter of this project, but I'm not affiliated, but I do donate money to them because I think it's a great piece of software and I love using it. So I'm self-hosting this in my Kubernetes home lab, and I'll be making a video about that a little bit later. So if you're interested in that, let me know down in the comments. But that's where most of my actual applications and everything that I that I build is actually hosted on my own Git servers because I don't want Microsoft scanning all of that code anymore. That is basically where everything lives. And this means that I can have what I call a stateless workstation. And I've talked about this in previous videos where I actually have been on a bit of a journey where I switched to a framework laptop and a framework desktop and switching computers a lot, rebooting or restarting. I'm now actually running this on a different OS as well, which I'm going to get into in a second. But I basically crafted my workflow in such a way that I can literally be up and running in 5 to 10 minutes on a new machine. And I've actually done that live on videos as well, which will be linked somewhere if you're interested. That is all made possible by Git. And it's not only my dot files, it's also like configuration of everything that's configured. Like for example, I'm running Sway now, and then you have Kanshi to manage the window. So if I go to my home directory and I check out my Kanshi configuration here, for example, I can configure my monitors here, and all this is also in version control, and everything is stored as code. So yeah, I absolutely love this type of workflow, and that is where everything is based around. So going to the OS section, if you've been following my videos lately, then you know that a few things have happened here. I am now actually completely away from macOS, and on the previous iteration of this video, I completely banned Windows from my life. Well, that has been so like that for a few years now. I was able to, for work and such, I was able to fall back on macOS for most of the time, but now I don't even use that anymore. I am actually now fully on Linux, fortunately. And this video, all of the videos that I've recorded and created over the past year and a half, everything is done and created on Linux. So even as a creator, it is completely possible to daily drive Linux. So if you're watching this on a Windows PC, shame on you. Check out this video where I talk about exactly why you should not be running Windows 10 or 11, and you should actually move to Linux today. In terms of Linux, I have been running Arch Linux, by the way, for well over a year. And at that point, I discovered something called an Immutable OS. So I'm actually currently running Fedora Atomic Sway. So I'm using this particular flavor of the Fedora Atomic desktops. So Fedora Atomic is something called an Immutable OS, which means that it is a read-only root file system. I cannot actually install packages or I cannot actually modify my root file system. All of these, everything is sort of baked into an image, and in the background, when a new update comes out, then Fedora releases a new image. So my entire machine is updated in one go. It's one image. And when I then reboot, this new image is loaded, but the old image is also kept around. So this means that you will always have a working computer, because if the new image somehow doesn't work, I can just very easily roll back. And I was first exposed to this concept through my work in Talos Linux, which is a Kubernetes-only Linux distribution. And when I discovered that this was also available for my workstation, I got very excited about that, because it's fully aligned with my container-based workflows, which I'm going to get into in a second. Yeah, I'm really liking it so far. I do miss Arch Linux, and I am going to return to Arch Linux at some point. But as an engineer, you also have to keep growing, right? And I realized that I was actually getting into a bit of a bubble. By running Arch Linux, I've sort of mastered administering my own system like that. So I wasn't gaining much more from it either. So I'm now doing Fedora Atomic Sway. And I'm going to get into the actual Sway choice in a second here as well. That is the one that I'm using currently, but that is also because I'm running this on a framework laptop. And there's going to be a video released about that very soon, where I talk about this laptop in particular and how it's working. Hint, it's working really well for me and I love it. But on my laptop, I'm going to be taking this with me when I'm going on my travels with my camper van while I work remotely. So I need to have one Linux system that is always going to work, and my Arch Linux system always worked. It's not that it's unstable or anything like that. But what I liked about this particular distribution is that it has this rollback capability in terms of images. And that feels like a very nice and stable way for a portable workstation that I would be 100% dependent on while I'm traveling. But it's still Linux. And also it's good to expose yourself to a few different things every now and then. So in this little journey, I did try out several distros because I got this laptop. I was thinking, I was actually going to build an Arch Linux system for that laptop, but I was thinking, maybe I should try something else. And these Immutable OSs had been on my radar for a while anyway. So I figured I'm going to do this. And actually what I think is I'm going to be having Arch Linux on my home machine, which is currently a framework desktop. And then I have my Arch Linux system there. And then I keep this one on Fedora Atomic Sway. And then I also keep myself relevant in several Linux distributions, which is important as an engineer as well. Good to zone in on one thing and specialize, but it's also good to also broaden your mindset when you reach senior level and start exposing yourself to other types of workflows and tools as well. In terms of window manager, I actually tried a few different things. I initially went for the Fedora Atomic Cosmic flavor of this. So if you watched my previous version of this video, the 2025 version, you will know that I was running Hyprland at the time on Arch Linux. So before I switched to Arch Linux, I was actually running several different distros, but I was using X11, right? So I wasn't using Wayland yet. And when I fully committed to Wayland, then my obvious choice was going to be Sway because I was already using i3. But again, then I was like, maybe I'll try something else. And I ended up with using Hyprland, which worked fine, I would say, for my Arch Linux system. But in the previous video, I also mentioned my worries about Hyprland, mainly it being developed by one guy, a student actually. And I follow him on Twitter, and he's actually right now talking about how busy he is with his exams, and there's so much that he wants to do with Hyprland, but he can't. And that is just dangerous, right? Because he built it alone, and there's a community there, and I support him, but it is a risky thing, I think. I think it is much better to commit to something that is more stable, and because he wrote it in C++, so he already eliminates a very large part of the open source community that way. And yeah, those were the thoughts I shared in that video. And NVIDIA is not officially supported as well. I was running it on NVIDIA card for well over a year. And frankly, I didn't have much problems. But now that I went this route, I had Hyprland and I was using Cosmic DE as the background. So if you don't know what Cosmic DE is developed by System 76, which is a company that creates Linux computers. And because they have their own hardware line that they will deliver with this software on it, they are also very much invested in keeping this running properly, right? So in other words, they're going to be supporting this. It's a professionally developed system with also a very large open source community. So it is a good DE, I would say. I was using this as my fallback when Hyprland didn't work, or also when I had some issues with gaming, I would fall back to Cosmic, and then it would work fine. So initially I went for Cosmic DE, but yeah, so the nice thing with these atomic desktops is that you can easily switch between them, right? So there is the Fedora Atomic Cosmic. You can rebase. You can just rebase your whole OS to a different one, and then you're suddenly running that, and not much has changed. So it actually works really well in that sense. So I was running this for a while, and eventually I ran into a couple of things that annoyed me. And the main thing that really annoys me that is still not supported in Cosmic is pinning things to workspaces on startup. So I have a very particular workflow where on the bottom left of my screen here, you will see 1, 2, 3, 4. These are my workspaces, right? Now, when my computer starts up, my browser is on workspace 1. My note-taking system, in this case Obsidian, is on workspace 2. On 3 is my terminal and etc. I have a few more apps that I run in certain workspaces. This way I can, in code, I can define what starts where and what happens when, and so that I can have a predictable and repeatable workflow. And I could not do that in Cosmic. I would start up my PC, I had to manually start all of these. Yes, you can auto start these, but then they would appear all in one workspace. And I tried with finding workarounds, but it didn't work for me. And also I was running into a couple of issues where you still see that Cosmic is in beta. Like, I'm not sure if is it still in beta? I don't know. But at least developments are still being made. But there were a few of these little things that, yeah, annoyed me basically. And then I just thought I haven't actually really run Sway because I went straight into Hyprland. And so I tried out Sway, and yeah, I'm never going back. Like, Sway is where it's at. Because if you've seen my previous workflow video about my Arch Linux workstation, in there I proudly said how I actually minimized Hyprland to just the bare minimum, right? I have the most boring configuration you will see in the entire world, because my entire workflow is optimized to be as fast as possible so I can switch between things as possible. And I don't want any of these animations. I don't want things to appear. I don't want to wait for something to appear. I want to be able to move things around quickly. And all of this beautiful animations and all of the colors is completely useless. It's a total distraction, especially if you spend hours and hours completely, making it perfect and making it beautiful. And I'm very much guilty of this. When I was a junior, I spent weeks, like in terms of hours, like literal 40+ hour work weeks I spent on rising and making beautiful workflows. And I thought it taught me important concepts like coding, etc. But it didn't. It almost didn't transfer to my daily work and my knowledge of Linux. I mean, it's fine if you want to do that as a creative hobby. For me, a computer is something where I am productive, where I build, where I create, where I work. In order to work as efficiently and as optimally as possible, I need things to be fast, responsive, and boring. And that is why Sway is the best for me. Sway, it's like I have my Way bar, which has a few nice little colors in my brand color scheme, which I like. But that's it. It's all very minimal. It's very small, no distractions, and it just does the job. And Sway, of course, Sway GitHub is super stable. It has a large community. 16K stars, and it's still being developed, right? But also you see 2 weeks ago, so you do see that a lot of these components are super stable, right? But when things break or when things need to be changed, then it is being changed by the community. So it has a massive community and it works super well. It's written in C. So there's much more people that are actually able to contribute to this. So I landed on Sway, and I don't think I'm going to go anywhere else. We'll see in the next year's workflow video, but this feels like home, and it's good, it's nice and stable, and I love it. So in terms of my terminal then, because I mentioned that I do most of my work in the terminal, so having a proper terminal emulator and having a proper setup for the terminal is of course extremely important. Well, I'm still using Alacritty. I like Alacritty because it's super minimal, it's small, it's fast, it runs on any operating system. And what I also like about it is, again, it's minimal. And I'm not sure if it's supported now, but in the beginning when I was exploring emulators, I saw these GitHub issues where they would talk about why are tabs not supported in Alacritty. They would say, well, Tmux already does that, so why would we build that into our terminal emulator? And I absolutely love this. Like, it's Unix philosophy. Create a tool to do one thing and to do it well. And in this case, it's emulating a terminal. And you don't need to have tabs in your terminal if you just learn Tmux, which has been around for decades, right? So yeah, that is the one that I still use. Very happy with it, and yeah, not considering any switch there. I'm still using Z Shell after I did my time on using just Bash for several years, which you should be doing. if you are watching this as a junior or someone who is interested in becoming a sysadmin, Linux engineer, DevOps engineer, or working with Kubernetes or containers, I strongly suggest, no, actually, I'm going to, no, you should not use Z shell at all for your first years. Just use bash, learn it well, because bash is the default shell on any Linux system that you're going to run into in the field. Z shell does a few things differently. And if you're going to be joining a team and they have several VMs, for example, or container images, and then you're going to be demanding that they install Z shell because that's the shell you use, you're going to be laughed at. So use bash, learn it well, learn the default shell that has been running on Linux systems for decades, because if you do like podman run Ubuntu, it Ubuntu, if I just spin up a quick Ubuntu container here, if I then do echo shell, then it is bin bash. It's not Z shell, which it's not even installed in here. So meaning that any container you're going to be working in or any Linux environment you're going to be working in has bash and not Z shell. And that is why you should actually use this for a few years, learn it well, and then you can move to Z shell. For me, I moved to Z shell mainly because the completion is nicer and better. So if I, for example, want to run sway message and tab, then this shows me the help as I'm tabbing, which is much nicer than what you would get in bash. There you would just get the output and you can choose, but it doesn't even show these messages here. That is actually the main reason why I switched to Z shell, because the completion is a little bit better and it makes me a little bit faster on the command line in that sense. But that is the main reason why I use it. So in this window manager section, I mentioned that I use Sway for the graphical side of things, but there it also says Tmux. And that is frankly because Tmux is actually my window manager. Like I do most of my work on the command line, which I'm going to be getting into in a second, but I run Tmux as my window manager. Most of my work happens in this screen that you see over here. So I'm constantly splitting windows and creating sessions, etc. And I'm going to have another little bit of a controversial opinion here, but it's actually advice that I give to all of my students, which is to always stick to the default key bindings when running Tmux. Because Ctrl-B-C, Ctrl-B-D, etc. Yes, it does feel a little bit weird to do the Ctrl-B, but if you get this in your fingers properly, then no matter which Linux system you're on, anywhere in the world, Tmux it's not certainly going to be there, but it's very likely that a Linux system that is designed for people to use, Tmux is going to be there. But if you then have your precious set of key bindings that you have created yourself, you are completely useless on that system if you don't know the default key bindings. So even though you can have this wonderful setup on your local machine, maybe using some shit like Zelich or whatever it's called, with a different menu, with different key bindings. And yeah, it's such a big mistake to do that. So if you just stick to the default key bindings, just do it for 2 weeks and then you don't even think about it anymore. In any system in the world, you're going to be able to split windows. You're going to be able to be productive without having to look at the man pages. If you have your own precious little config, you're going to be on a system and it's like, oh, how was it again? Yeah, I do Ctrl-B pipe like this. That's an alias that people will use because, yeah, that you have a vertical split. I can see the point, but if that doesn't work on the system, you're like, oh, how was it again? Well, it's Ctrl-B, Ctrl-B %, right? That is how you do it. So just use the default key bindings. I promise you, the muscle memory kicks in and you don't even think about it anymore. So as you see, my Tmux has been modified a fair bit. If I just run another podman run it Ubuntu, another container here, and I do apt update and apt install Tmux. If I now run Tmux inside of the container, you will see that looks very different, right? It has the green status bar. It has it does, when I create new windows, they start from 0, for example. They are down in the bottom. And yeah, so I've modified this in some ways. So what I like is to have, first of all, to have that thing in the top. I don't want it to have this ugly green color. And also I want this to start at 1 instead of 0, because if I do Control B 2, I'm now switching to workspace 2, Control B 3, or actually window 3, Control B 1, then Control B 0 does not make sense because my finger needs to move to the right side. If I do Control B 1, then it is on the 1, so it's on the left side. And like in my optimization flow, it feels like I was spending a nanosecond thinking about having to go to the right side of my keyboard instead of 1. So even though like programmatically it is more correct to start at 0 and to use that, I wanted to have at 1, because then my fingers go from left to right when I'm switching. Likewise with the tabs or the workspaces in Sway, I want that same finger to work in my Tmux workspace as well. Because remember, I spend most of my time here. So every time I have to spend a nanosecond thinking about this, then that is a waste, some wasted time. So that's how I like to have it, and this is how I've configured it. That is basic. Tmux is basically my main window manager. I've recently created a complete set of courses for my students in KubeCraft, where I teach them the foundations of Linux and Bash scripting, how to use Bash properly as an engineer. And that has been a lovely refresh for myself to the fundamentals too, because I use these without thinking very much about them. And it's so ingrained into my workflow that I don't even think about it. It just happens naturally, right? But to teach something means that you also have to deeply understand it. And you'll be surprised if you do things yourself, like almost naturally, or not by not thinking about it. If you then have to go and explain that to someone else, you'll be surprised how hard it actually is to accurately convey very important topics, because I have a large responsibility, right? Like people come to me to become DevOps engineers, very often from scratch completely. They have no technical experience. I teach them to go from 0 to DevOps engineers, and we land jobs every single week in KubeCraft. What I'm teaching them is working, but it's a large responsibility, and I take that very seriously. When I was going through this, I also realized that there were a few things that I was not doing in the command line very much myself anymore. I was defaulting back to the browser for things like email and browsing and querying. And in that process of going really deep into the foundations again, going really deep into teaching mode and teaching people how to use a computer, how to actually use a Linux computer properly. In creating that, I also had a bit of an awakening inside of myself where, there is still 5% that I still have to bring into the command line, because it is much faster and it is much, like the interface to your computer. The studies have shown that the most efficient and effective way of interacting with the computer is the command line. Like until Neuralink actually works and you can interact with your computer through thought, or whether it is through a wire or telepathically, until we have that, the command line is going to be the fastest, most efficient way to interact with your computer. So I always want to optimize my workflow with the command line. So one of the additions here is that I'm using Aerc for managing emails on the command line. So I can view my inboxes. I have multiple accounts in here. And if I open one of these emails, then you see that it is rendered in plain text, which is really nice. So I can very easily, very quickly navigate my emails. And then from here, I can very, very quickly archive them like this with capital A. And I can, like very often, many of these emails, you don't even need to read them, right? So for these, I know, okay, I can archive this, etc. So it works really well. So I'm doing most of my email management from the command line now using Aerc. So that is a nice one. Another one is browsing. So when I'm coding, when I'm working on things, then very often the default is to, well, first of all, I always go to the man pages first, right? So man bash. This is all you need to learn bash, really. Like any engineer should at least read this from top to bottom at least once in their lifetime, because here you have everything, even about parameter expansion. Like it's so, you just have the full topic here about parameter expansion, and you will, it is it's so good that you can just be coding in bash and then, oh, what was that parameter again to set a default value? You use man bash parameter expansion, and then you have it right here, and then it will show you here parameter word use default values, right? It's amazing. That is the first default, but I noticed that when something was not in bash, in the man pages, so man k Claude, for example, oops, man k Claude, then you will see, I can't type Claude, then you will see there's obviously there's no man page about Claude code, right? So the default then is to go to the browser. Now this is already quite efficient for me because I'm now in my terminal. I would do the command 1 to switch to my browser. I do Control T to create a new tab, and then I would do Claude code. And then here I have my Vim extension enabled, so I do escape, and then I can actually scroll with this. And if I do F and then AJ, then I would open the page like this. So I don't even use my mouse when browsing on in the browser like this. This is still not as efficient as doing it in the command line very often, right? So if I for example want to grab something from my own blog, I would do w3m mishavandenberg.com. So now I have my own blog open here. I can tab through the links here, and let's just open the Sovereign Craftsman blog article here. Let's say I want to grab something from this article. I would just do Control B bracket, Shift V, select this, press Enter, and now I can quit this. And if I paste this, I have this in my clipboard, right? So when I need a piece of code, for example, when I'm wondering about something, I will run this. How do I increase context in Claude code? This is then opening DuckDuckGo with my with W3M, and I can then open this and I can read about it. And if there is a piece of code here, for example, or if there's something that I want, Control B bracket, select, enter, escape, and paste. I have it right here. I didn't even have to leave the terminal. When you get good at this, when you get really fast at this, I'm still learning this, but you can see here that I am actually defaulting to doing to searching and browsing from the command line first, because then I can grab the text, I can pipe it, I can do so much, and in this environment I have complete control. So if I then again open my own website, if I want to read a blog, for example, if I want to open my own blog and read it, then I prefer to read it in plain text, where I have control over the font size, the font, where I can have control over what how it's rendered, etc. Like, I think plain text is actually the best way to consume things. If you have the like I work on the terminal 10 hours a day, so this is a very familiar and comfortable environment for me, completely optimized for my preferences. You know, the web, when you open the web, this is rendered because this is rendered text, right? And it's shown as the creator has configured it. But when the internet was originally designed, when the web was originally designed, the idea was actually to have it more like a Kindle. You know, when you have a Kindle device for e-reading, on there you can actually put in your own font. You can do your font size. You choose how everything is rendered. You control how things are rendered. And the web was originally designed that way too, that people could, on their end, modify how things were rendered. Now, obviously, that's not the case anymore. And what I mean to say by that is that when you get used to scrolling on the command line and consuming on the command line, you have control over how you consume things. And it becomes much more efficient, in my opinion, for me. So there are a few alternatives. There's Links and there's W3M. Links is the OG one to use, and W3M is a little bit more modern. It's still being actively developed somewhat. So I chose W3M, and that is the one that I'm using. And this command here that I then use, this is just a custom command that I wrote where I will pipe something like, for example, what is the difference between Links and W3M? And then this is piping that to DuckDuckGo, where I can then open one of these pages and start reading about it, right? Now you'll find when you do this, you'll find that some of the web pages that you are used to consuming are actually not compatible with this type of rendering, right? So not all web pages you can actually visit this way. For example, can I do w3msubstack.com? Does this even work? Subscriptions? No, like this. Here we go. This site requires JavaScript to run correctly. Please turn on JavaScript or unblock scripts. You see here you need JavaScript, but this is also a very private way of browsing, right? You don't get all of this tracking, cookies, all of this shit. You have complete control over that. So this is actually, in terms of browsers, if you want to do a proper private browsing experience, you should probably use something like this. But you do... it's like that meme of the stages of privacy, right? I don't know if you've seen that one. Yeah, here, I pulled it up. I posted it in CubeCraft, but there's I love, this is one of my favorite memes, where you have the tech normie, the tech conservative, where you then start using Brave. It's like, yeah, big tech is cool, but there should be a healthy balance. Newborn paranoid, like I am basically in that stage, I would say. But I'm moving towards the tech paranoid, where it says... actually, I'm getting closer towards the FSF member, where it's saying, hasn't rendered a full web page since 2012 because of the JavaScript. Well, I think that's such a fun one. So yeah, no, I'm definitely not there. But you see here that links and W3M is actually mentioned in the meme itself. So yeah, in some ways, I'm getting closer and closer to that stage. So in CubeCraft, we also have fun, right? It's not just about landing jobs. It's just a great community of engineers who come together and work on the same goal of landing DevOps jobs. So yes, that is in terms of browsing. Then finally, I've shown you the way how I search on the internet, but there's also obviously we are using AI for everything. So what I also do is I have my question mark command that I say, is it safe to drink water from plastic bottles? I don't know. And now it's going to be, now it's asking Claude, right, from the command line. So here it's going to talk about key points. Food grade plastics are approved by health agencies. Potential concerns, yeah, avoid leaving bottles in hot cars, as heat may increase chemical leaching. And yeah, I don't know if you have been exposed to the microplastics rabbit hole yet. I'm sorry if I am exposing you right now, but we live in concerning times. Do not drink water from plastic bottles. But that was just the first thing that came up. But as I'm coding, as I'm working on the command line, maybe I'm working on a bash script, or I'm just working, yeah, let's say I'm working on a bash script and I'm thinking, oh, what was it again? How do I set a default value in bash using parameter expansion? Can't type, but then I can just query that from the command line like this. I'm going to get my answer right here. I can now go here. I can take this line of code, for example, take this and open my bash script, and then I can start editing right here. And I never had to leave the command line. I didn't have to use the mouse. I didn't have to do anything to get this. And what's even better is that I could even call this from the command line. So let's say I'm working here in Vim. And how do I set a default value in bash using parameter expansion? If I then pipe this to my fabric query command, then this is going to replace the current line with the output of that command. So here we go. I actually have the output of ChatGPT right here in my editor, without any plugins, without any sort of extra things. This is just using Unix filters, bash, and Vim exactly as things were intended. So let's do this again if this went a little bit fast for you. So let's say I'm writing a blog post about microplastics. Let's say I'm doing the dangers of microplastics, something like that. If I now then have a question for Claude or ChatGPT or whatever you use. If I then, are microplastics dangerous? If I then pipe this to my fabric query command, here it's my custom command, then it's going to replace this line with the output of that command. So I'm sending this to my fabric query, and then in a second, it's going to replace that line with the output of the command So here it's in my editor. I didn't leave my editor. I didn't leave my Tmux window. I didn't do anything. I have it right here in my editor. And now I can start working with this. I can write it, and this will work with code as well, right? So if I do something super silly, like write a Python function to add 2 values, pipe that to Fabric query like this, then it's going to ask Claude, in my case, it's going to give me the output of it, and then I have it right here in my editor. Now this is no plugins, no magic. This is just Bash, Unix filters, and knowing how to use Vim properly. So if you're thinking, wow, I want to learn that level of mastery, and if you're interested in landing a tech job as a DevOps engineer, system admin, or platform engineer, then KubeCraft is the place to be. This is where I teach the craft of becoming a Kubernetes engineer, work with a command line centric workflow. Everything is captured in DevOps OS, HomeLab OS, where I'm going to be teaching you from the ground up how to run Linux, how to use it properly, how to install Arch Linux, how to work with containers, how to set up Kubernetes clusters and run them, all with the main goal of landing you a 6-figure tech job within 6 months, 6 to 12 months, depending on the starting point where you're at. Check out the link in the description below, and I'm happy to teach you there. So that's those are some new additions to my workflow. I was using these Unix filters, these custom Unix filters already, but now with AI and the possibility of querying AI from the command line, the possibilities are becoming even bigger. So yeah, I'm absolutely loving this. I'm having a great time with constantly creating and updating my workflow in this way and making it more and more efficient every single day. So next, we should move to dev containers. You've seen this in other videos as well, but if I do devpod ls, you will see that I have a HomeLab devpod here, and there's also an Aura scraper actually. Yeah, let's do the devpod delete Aura scraper. Let's delete that one. And if I then go to my file system and I do Aura scraper, let me pull the latest updates here. So this Aura scraper is some software that I built to scrape the data of my Aura ring. I'm not wearing it right now actually, but I'm wearing it all day, and this tracks my sleep and my movements. I'm doing the same with my Whoop, and I love data. I love tracking it. I'm a bit of a nerd about that. So I use multiple devices. I also have a Whoop scraper, but my Aura scraper then scrapes the data all the time so that I can access it in my Grafana instance that's running on my Kubernetes HomeLab, of course. The scraper puts everything, scrapes the data, puts it in my self-hosted Postgres database clusters running on my Kubernetes clusters. And this way I can actually create things, cool stuff like this Whoop versus Aura comparison dashboard in Grafana, where I can actually compare the readiness scores with the Aura scores, what my HRV is in these different applications, and also, for example, the sleep efficiency. And yeah, this stuff is interesting to me to see the differences between them, etc. So I'm strongly advocate like taking control over your own data. Like this data lives with these vendors. Like you have to use when you use these devices, the data is there, obviously, but that doesn't mean that I can actually I can have my own instance of this data, and I can have my own version and my own copy of the data running in my own databases that I manage myself, backed up. Everything that you see here is running in Kubernetes, and yeah, so it's all my personal infrastructure. And I actually own this data forever. I have this data, I can do whatever I want with it. And this is where AI also becomes very interesting, right? And again, this is all of this, like spinning up Kubernetes clusters and running databases on and managing them with GitOps, using production grade patterns. All of that is taught in my latest course about Kubernetes in the cloud, which you can find in the KubeCraft Career Accelerator. So if you want to build this kind of stuff for yourself, running your own databases on your own infrastructure on Kubernetes, then I strongly recommend you check this out. Many people are landing jobs because of this course alone. It's one of my masterpieces, to be honest. So going back to the Aura scraper, I now have this is my repo, right? This is just my repo with code, But if I want to develop in this, for example, I am running this on Kubernetes. Well, if I run which kubectl, then we see, well, kubectl is not found here, right? Kubectl is not installed on my local system, my Fedora system. So if I want to develop on this project, what I do is I do devpod up dot. So now it has installed all of the packages that are defined in the repo, and now it's going to clone my dot files and install everything that I need to have in every single system that I work. So any environment where I am going to be serious developing is going to take all of these packages, and then it's going to install LazyVim, Neovim, LazyVim, and configure it just as I like it. And now if I do devpod ls, then we see that my URA scraper container is ready. So if I then devpod SSH into my URA scraper, then now I have everything I need to develop on this project. So for example, in the mies.toml, you see that this project, for example, requires SQLite and the GitHub CLI. So if I do which gh, then we see that gh is installed, which kubectl, this is installed, and this was not installed on my local system. So inside of my container, I keep everything separated from my host system, and everything that I need to develop and work with this project is now here. And if I then open up my LazyVim, it is now seeing, okay, you're on a new system, so I have to install all of the packages. So it automatically sets up everything with my color scheme, my language servers. All of that configuration is completely portable. In just in one line, I can spin up my complete environment wherever I am. So this is extremely powerful, and also this is taught completely in a 8-hour course that I created for my KubeCraft students. So if you join and you go here, there is the Dev Containers Neovim and Config Management course that teaches you exactly how to get this workflow from scratch, so you can build yourself. You get my template of my dot files, you get everything, you can just copy and paste it, but I don't just want to give you the workflow and that's it. I actually teach you how to use it, right? How everything works from scratch. You're going to be learning all of that. So if you're interested in actually becoming at this level of command line usage, then you can check that out. So all of the main work, my development work, my home lab work, all of that always happens in dev containers. And I like that because, again, it is completely separate from my whole system. I can install all the packages that I need there without interacting with my host system. Everything is nice and cleanly separated. And when I'm done developing with this project, I just delete the dev container and everything is gone. And that is one of the main advantages of this. On one of my recent videos, I'm quitting Arch Linux, here's why. One of the comments that I got most on this video is, you might like NixOS. You should use NixOS. NixOS obviously is the thing here. What are you talking about? It's called NixOS. So people are saying you should be using NixOS. And yeah, I've talked about this in other videos, but NixOS is not the way to do this. It is a completely wrong way to approach it. You are approaching this from the perspective as someone who wants to work as a DevOps engineer, platform engineer, and also stay relevant in that industry. And actually, let's talk a little bit about this, because Dev Containers is a standard established by Microsoft. So containers.dev, this is a specification, and it is maintained by Microsoft, and it's also incorporated in the Visual Studio Code editor, for example. So first of all, you have a clear specification, you have dev container features, you have clear development container specification. The dev container.json schema is defined. Everything is cleanly defined in a specification. This means that companies and teams, etc., when they adopt this specification, they will always be talking the same language, right? And this language in this case is, how are we going to create reproducible environments where developers can come in and be up and running within seconds, right? That is the main goal of a proper, mature development experience if that's something that you're focused on in a company. So if you've ever read the Unicorn Project, that book, if you haven't, like if you're interested in DevOps, then shame on you. You should read the Phoenix Project and the Unicorn Project books. But in there, I think it's the Unicorn Project one where she takes the perspective of a developer in an old-fashioned company coming in and like spending almost a month submitting tickets trying to get the programs to build on her machine. And that is actually what has been solved here with DevOps, right? And the way to do that is, in my opinion, and the industry's opinion, by the way, is dev containers. NixOS is completely irrelevant in terms of widespread enterprise adoption. So if you're watching this, like a large portion of my audience is people who want to become DevOps engineers. If I'm now going to tell them to learn NixOS, I'm going to do so much damage to so many people because NixOS is notoriously hard to learn. It has horrible documentation and it is way too complicated for accomplishing what it needs to accomplish. So actually, and I'm not alone about this. I mean, we can literally just ask AI. So if I want to become a DevOps engineer or platform engineer, should I learn NixOS or Dev Container? Let's just ask Claude and see what it says. Short answer, learn traditional DevOps tools first, then consider Nix as specialization. Why traditional DevOps first? Most jobs require these core skills. Containers, Docker, Kubernetes, infrastructure as code. Get hired first, learn Docker, Kubernetes, one cloud, use Nix on the side, maybe, and then specialize later. NixOS for infra if it fits your niche. Nix is niche. So how widespread is NixOS in mature organizations, enterprises? I want to be as employable as possible, and I wonder if I should use NixOS or Dev Containers. NixOS as a primary OS is very niche in enterprises. It's rare outside of specific tech-forward companies. And yes, there are notable users like Replit, Spotify, some fintech startups, but Nix as a tool is growing but still uncommon. And for maximum employability, prioritize containers, Docker, Dev Containers. This is why I don't use NixOS. First of all, because of my own preferences in terms of everything I do in my free time always has to contribute to my career as well. So if I spend so much time, like how much time does it cost? So how much time does it take for a beginner who knows Linux fundamentals to learn Nix and NixOS so they can configure their whole system? So look at this. This is what Claude is saying here. So a realistic timeline. Basic understanding, 1 to 2 weeks. Functional system, 1 to 2 months. Comfortable proficient, 3 to 6 months. Advanced, 6 to 12 months. So to be comfortable and proficient with NixOS is going to take you 3 to 6 months, according to Claude. Okay, so you're telling me on this YouTube video, instead of using something like Dev Containers, which has an enterprise-grade maintained specification and widespread adoption across many different industries, many different enterprises, is completely compatible with Visual Studio Code, GitHub code spaces. Like GitHub code spaces are Dev Containers. You're telling me that I need to spend 3 to 6 months learning a niche technology that is only used in forward fintech companies just so I can manage my .dot files? I mean, you're freaking crazy. You're absolutely crazy. People who are commenting this on my video here, you are so far removed from the reality of having to land a 6-figure job that I'm not even going to listen to you. I actually should do a separate video on this, but I need to calm down. So you're telling me I need to spend 3 to 6 months learning something that is extremely niche, that is not used anywhere, where instead I can learn Dev Containers, which is enterprise adoption and also contributes to my development as an engineer, because now I'm working with containers inside of containers, I'm learning about container runtimes, and I'm doing stuff that is reproducible anywhere. I mean, I rest my case. Screw NixOS, screw Nix, don't use it, don't touch it. Focus on dev containers, especially if you're in the beginning of your career. And then, yes, much to the same effect like I talked about with Hyprland, if you then, as a creative hobby, for fun, you want to start building these beautiful animated desktop environments, hey, go for it. If you know containers, Kubernetes, and everything well, and you're just working in one company and all you're considered with is just your main local machine, hey, go ahead and learn NixOS. Spend those 6 months, deepen your craft as an engineer. And the very fact that these comments exist tells me that NixOS is probably a good tool for the job. Hell, I might even do it myself. Like when I'm financially independent eventually, and if I don't need to worry about landing jobs and I don't have that kind of pressure anymore, then maybe one day I will learn NixOS because it is very compelling. I like the idea of it. I like the, I think I would very much like to do it, but that timeline, that investment of 6 months is not something that I can do for a technology that is virtually irrelevant for my professional career. So all of that being said, this is why I don't use NixOS and I use dev containers instead. And also because I have a responsibility for my students and for the content that I produce on this YouTube channel. That I have across platforms, I have over 100,000 followers now. So I'm taking this very seriously with the things that I'm saying. If I'm now going to say NixOS is the best thing ever, I'm going to do a lot of damage with people doing this stuff for 6 months and not getting anywhere. Okay, enough about that. Let's move to Neovim. Not much has changed here. I am still just using LazyVim. I've tried so many things like Kickstart, blah, blah, blah. I use plain, old school Vim for several years, and then I moved to Neovim. I always say to my students, use Vim for the first few years at least, and when you find yourself needing to write Vim script, that is the time when you move to Neovim. And I just use LazyVim. That's what I landed on. Works super well, super happy with it. And yeah, I have my complete configuration. It is completely customized to my own needs, but yeah, not much has changed there. So let's talk about, there's a few things left. There's one big change in my workflow is of course AI. Then we'll talk about the browser and give you an update on my note-taking systems. So moving to AI, there's been a quite big lot of changes in my workflow, as you've seen already, right? Like I was editing stuff and I'm like talking to AI on the command line. So that is a big change here. But also another one here is of course like actually working with the AI. So I was around, like I was in the beginning of my tech career, actually. That's when ChatGPT came around. So I spent 2 years in my career not having ChatGPT. So I'm still somewhat old school in the sense that I had to use Stack Overflow, Man Pages, and Google to solve the problems I was getting when I was learning Kubernetes, for example. I couldn't just ask, what does this mean in Kubernetes? I would get a perfect answer. Nowadays, that's very different. And things have become much more advanced than just a chat bot in the browser, which has been the default way of interacting with these LLMs so far, right? And even with Claude Code, like this is just, in 10 years from now, we're going to look back and think, oh my God, we were like using this in the terminal and we were writing, oh my God. And it was just back and forth. For now, what we have is Claude Code. I use Claude Code. That is my default way of interacting with AIs. Well, LLMs, I should say, large language models. I have it in my home lab repo. I have it with my customers. So one important thing here is, yes, I use Claude Code everywhere, but I don't use it on my host system. So I laugh so much. Like I see it almost every day on X, where people share horror stories where Claude Code deleted their entire home directory and their shiny little MacBook is now completely useless. And this is, yeah, I don't want to, this is not this is not to come across as elitist or something like that, but here you really see the difference between people who actually understand a Unix system and who know how to work on the command line, and people who have no idea, who download Claude code and then just let it loose on everything, right? And I think that everybody should learn the command line. If you're a serious computer user, then learn Linux and learn the command line. But I think that you need to master the command line fundamentals first before you start using tools like Claude Code, because you have no idea what's going on, and you get stuff like, for example, Claude Code deleting your home directory. So again, how I do it is I run it in dev containers, obviously. So I have Claude installed in my dev container. I can just configure it like this. And because I'm not I don't have a browser in my dev container, it will just prompt me like this, and then I can authorize here, and now I'm logged in successfully, and here we go. Now I can start working on Claude Code. So give me a summary of this project, and now I can easily just give it all the permissions it needs. Like I can use this in privilege mode, etc. It doesn't matter because it is in a container. It cannot do any damage because it is completely contained in this container. So when I would run Claude Code on my host system, I have my complete Zettelkasten here. I have all of my nodes located on my host system. I'm not going to send all of that to Anthropic. And yes, you can sort of prompt it and allow things. You have to sort of give it permission for it to read certain directories, etc. But still, I don't want that risk at all. So in here, Claude does not see anything like that. If I go to my home directory, it does not have anything. It just has only the code and the install files that it needs to develop on this project and nothing more. So none of my host file system is ever exposed to Anthropic. So that is the proper way to do it, in my opinion. So my advice is use Claude Code. That's the tool to focus on. Stop using like Cursor or Windsurf or all these kinds of things. Just use Claude Code. Grow up, be a man, and use the command line. For me, I only use Claude. I canceled my ChatGPT subscription a few months ago because, I mean, Claude Opus 4.5, there's just nothing beats that. And ChatGPT is just horrible, in my opinion, compared to this. So I use Claude 4.5, and for smaller stuff, I will use Haiku. So I have like huge, extremely advanced personal AI systems that I built myself, but which I'm not sharing publicly. But for there, I use parallel agents, and for like smaller stuff, using Haiku is much faster, and also it limits your token usage. Even though I am on the super max plan on Anthropic, I frequently hit my limits with all of the stuff that I'm building and that I'm doing. So that is, I generally use Opus and then Haiku for like small one-off tasks. Now, another tool that is extremely useful in the AI toolkit is Fabric. So I'm a huge fan of Daniel Miesler's work. Yeah, huge fan of what he does. And one of these tools is Fabric. You have probably seen this so far already, but what is great about Fabric is that it follows the Unix philosophy, right? So you have a CLI tool to interact with AI. And I think if you're even remotely interested in becoming better at the command line, then you have to stop using these browser applications in general, but also with AI, because let me show you what you can do. So Fabric, and make sure that you configure the command line completion. It has, for example, it has all of these patterns, right? So you can do suggest pattern, and then you say, I want to write an essay about NixOS. Okay, so it's going to suggest a pattern. So this is the pattern to use. So it's suggesting the right essay pattern. So I know for a fact that this one needs an author name as a variable. So here I did one like write an essay about microplastics, but let's do something like write an essay about whether one should learn NixOS if one is interested in landing a DevOps job or a job as a platform engineer and whether it is better to learn dev containers. So this is now from the command line going to query the LLM, and it's going to actually perform the job. So here's the essay that it wrote. NixOS, dev containers, and getting hired. The question of whether to learn NixOS for DevOps. As a simple answer, probably not, at least not first. It's not because NixOS is bad, it's actually quite good. The problem is one of prevalence. Most companies don't use NixOS. Most job postings don't mention it. Most hiring managers have never touched it. Dev containers, on the other hand, show up everywhere. They're a layer on top of Docker, blah, blah, blah. So, you know, this is how we then write an essay. But what's cool is that we can take the output of that command. And again, this is Unix philosophy and command line basics, right? But I can pipe that. Let me make this a little bit smaller. And let's do that to Fabric P summarize, for example. So I'm now going to create an essay, and I'm also going to summarize that, for example. But you can also take the output of some command from the command line, for example, logs or anything like that. And if you have a pattern to analyze logs, then you can string these kinds of commands together and then get the output that you want, right? So in this case, I am generating an essay and then I am summarizing it, but this is just a weird example. But I hope you can start seeing how, just like how you would, you know, take log commands, pipe them to grep, etc., do all these kinds of things, you can now also start stringing together AI commands using Fabric. I really like this. 110% summary, dev containers offer more career value than NixOS for DevOps roles because they solve common problems companies actually have. So again, I'm going to rest my case now, but the AI is consistently telling you, do not learn NixOS if you're interested in landing these jobs. So, but that is how Fabric is becoming extremely useful for me, because they have like these extract wisdom patterns, and I can take essays or articles, extract the wisdom, create a summary out of it, and then I can start using this in my own work, you know? So those are the two main tools that I use day to day, which have started to take a huge place in my workflow. Now let's wrap things up with the browser. The previous video, I was using Qt browser and Firefox. Unfortunately, I had to leave Qt browser because it was not playing well with my YubiKey. And in the meantime, Firefox changed their terms as well. So they are now basically allowed to, I don't know the details, but when it came out, they changed their terms. And basically, they're allowed to read what you do in the browser, and you have no control. You don't own the data that you enter in the browser anymore. I think that was it. Don't quote me on it, please. But something changed in their terms, making it less privacy friendly. So I eventually landed on Vivaldi. That's the browser that I'm currently using, Vivaldi browser. And is this the most private alternative one? Probably not. But I did like this one because it is developed by an individual company, and it is sponsored. They have this thing where when you create the browser, they're going to prompt you for VPN here. So they have like a deal with Proton, and that's how they make money probably. But here they claim that privacy isn't just a feature in Vivaldi, it's a philosophy. No profiling, data mining, no nonsense. Built-in ad tracker blockers plus end-to-end encryption for sync data. So I really like the browser so far. It's fast, it works well, and it has end-to-end syncing of my bookmarks. Like I don't have any passwords or credit card data in my browser. You should never store that stuff in a browser, God forbid. But yeah, this is the one that I ended up with because I have a few browser extensions that I wish to use, which are almost only available in the Chrome web browser store, the extension store. So I'm basically limited to Chrome-based browsers at this point. So yeah, that's like the compromise, right? But as I mentioned, I'm doing more and more of my browsing on the command line, actually. And then finally, as the part of my workflow is the Zettelkasten and note-taking. Well, not much has changed there, actually. It is still, I still take notes using the Zettelkasten method. If I look here, my system has over 5,000 notes. You can see it in the bottom of the screen here. I think maybe one thing that did change was that I have a Zettelkasten command now. So if I run the ckday, then it's going to open my daily note. Yeah, and one thing that has changed here is that I am using my Neovim much more to interact with my Zettelkasten, and I also created a my own custom Zettelkasten CLI, and I'm using this. It's very bespoke. It's created for myself. Like, this is not a good open source project or anything, but if you're interested in it, then you feel free to take a look. But I basically only use my my Zettelkasten from the command line using the CLI tool that I wrote myself. It is in many ways similar to Obsidian and Vim, but I just wanted to have something that I control completely myself, and this seemed to be a lot more bloated than what I needed. So I just built my own CLI. So that is basically the only update I have to share on this. So yeah, this is my complete Neovim Tmux and Linux workflow for 2026. Summarizing, still on dev containers, now only on Linux, and incorporating much more AI CLI tools here, and always striving to go more and more into the CLI. And this year, like adding my email, browsing, everything, these custom commands, I'm now using those in the command line as much as possible. So all of the stuff you've seen, if you want to get access to any of this, if you want to learn directly from me, if you want to become the person that does this kind of stuff, then check out the link below. KubeCraft is probably the thing that you want, and I'm very happy to mentor and teach you there personally. This is what I do. Check it out if you're interested in it. If not, no problem at all. And then I hope you had some value from this video, and I will see you in the next one.